Isabella Montenegro Blackwood stands frozen in the doorway of her husband's office, 7 months pregnant and clutching a dinner surprise that will never be eaten. Through the glass walls, she watches in horror as a stunning blonde woman poses before the mirror, wearing something that makes Isabella's blood turn to ice. The Montenegro crown, her family's sacred heirloom, passed down through 15 generations of European nobility, worth $50 million, sits regally atop the stranger's head. "How do I look, my king?" The woman purrs to Alexander, Isabella's billionaire husband. "Do you think I'm worthy of being your queen?" Alexander moves behind the impostor, his hands possessive on her shoulders. "Victoria, you're everything Isabella could never be. You understand power, ambition, success." When the takeout containers crash to the floor, both lovers turn toward Isabella with expressions that will shatter her world forever. But what they don't know is that Isabella Montenegro carries the blood of warrior queens, and she's about to remind everyone what happens when you try to steal a crown from royalty. Like and subscribe for more incredible stories of royal revenge. The rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackwood Tower as Isabella Montenegro Blackwood placed her manicured hand on her 7-month pregnant belly. The city of Los Angeles sprawled beneath her like a glittering kingdom. But tonight, something felt different. Something felt wrong. At 28, Isabella possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that graced magazine covers and royal portraits. Her raven black hair cascaded down her shoulders like silk, and her emerald eyes held the wisdom of old European nobility. She was not just beautiful, she was regal, carrying herself with the poise that came from centuries of Montenegro bloodline flowing through her veins. The Blackwood estate perched majestically on the Hollywood Hills, a modern castle where Isabella had spent the last 3 years as the wife of Alexander Blackwood, the most powerful financial mogul on the West Coast. Their marriage had been a fairy tale, or so she had believed. The Harvard MBA graduate had sacrificed her own promising career in international finance to support Alexander's empire, managing charitable foundations and hosting galas that raised millions for worthy causes. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, Isabella had planned to surprise her husband with his favorite meal, lobster thermidor from Nobu, delivered personally to his penthouse office. She wanted to discuss baby names, nursery designs, and their future as a family. Little Adrian, their unborn son, had been particularly active today, as if sensing his mother's excitement. The elevator climbed silently to the 50th floor of Blackwood Tower. Isabella's Louboutin heels clicked against the marble as she approached Alexander's private office, the takeout bag from Nobu warming her hands. She could hear voices through the door, Alexander's deep baritone and another voice, distinctly feminine and unfamiliar. "You look absolutely breathtaking in that crown. Darling," Alexander's voice carried through the mahogany door. "You were born to be a queen." Isabella's blood turned to ice. The crown, the Montenegro crown, her family's most sacred heirloom, passed down through 15 generations of European nobility, a masterpiece of craftsmanship featuring 500 diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds, worth over $50 million, but priceless in sentimental value. It had been her grandmother's dying wish that Isabella wear it on her wedding day and pass it to her firstborn son. With trembling hands, Isabella turned the door handle. What she saw would haunt her forever. There, standing before the massive mirror in Alexander's office, was a woman Isabella had never seen before. She was stunning, platinum blonde with curves that defied gravity, wearing a scarlet-red dress that hugged every inch of her body. But it wasn't the dress that made Isabella's world collapse. It was the Montenegro crown sitting regally atop the stranger's head. The woman, who couldn't be older than 25, was admiring herself in the mirror while Alexander sat in his leather chair, watching her with an expression Isabella had never seen him wear. Pure, unadulterated desire. "How do I look, my king?" the woman purred, striking a pose that belonged in a men's magazine. "Do you think I'm worthy of being your queen?" Alexander stood and walked behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Victoria, you're everything Isabella could never be. You understand power, ambition, success. You're the woman who belongs beside a man like me. Isabella's world shattered like crystal hitting concrete. The takeout bag slipped from her numb fingers, the containers hitting the floor with a crash that echoed through the office like gunshots. Both Alexander and the woman Victoria turned toward the sound. For a moment, time stood still. Isabella stood framed in the doorway, one hand instinctively protecting her unborn child, the other gripping the doorframe for support as her legs threatened to give way. "Isabella," Alexander said, his voice devoid of surprise or guilt, "what are you doing here?" The casualness of his tone was like a dagger to her heart. No shame, no embarrassment, no attempt to explain, just cold indifference. "What am I doing here?" Isabella's voice came out as a whisper, then grew stronger. "This is my husband's office. The real question is, what is she doing wearing my crown?" Victoria slowly removed the Montenegro crown, handling it with the casual disregard one might show a costume jewelry piece. She set it on Alexander's desk with a soft clink, then turned to face Isabella with a smile that was pure poison. "Oh, this old thing?" Victoria's voice was honey-sweet with an underlying edge of steel. "Alexander was just showing me some of the family antiques. He said I looked better in it than anyone ever had." Isabella felt the baby kick, as if little Adrian was responding to her distress. She moved into the office, her eyes locked on the crown, her grandmother's crown, her heritage, her legacy. "That crown has been in my family for 300 years, Isabella said, her voice gaining strength. "It's not some trinket to be tried on by random women." Alexander stepped between them, and for a moment, Isabella hoped he would defend her, apologize, explain that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, he looked at her with eyes that had grown cold and distant. "Isabella, you're being dramatic. Victoria is my new strategic advisor. She was simply admiring some of our collections." "Strategic advisor," Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what we're calling mistresses now?" Victoria gasped in mock offense. "Isabella, I think pregnancy hormones are making you paranoid. Alexander and I have a purely professional relationship." But Isabella wasn't looking at Victoria. She was studying her husband's face, searching for any trace of the man she had fallen in love with. The man who had once written her love letters and promised they would conquer the world together. That man was gone. In his place stood a stranger with Alexander's face, wearing Alexander's custom Tom Ford suit, but with eyes that held no warmth for her whatsoever. "Professional relationship," Isabella repeated slowly. "I see. And does this professional relationship typically involve trying on my family heirlooms after hours?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Isabella, I think you should go home. Rest. You're obviously overwrought." "Oh, overwrought!" Isabella's voice rose, and she felt the first spark of anger burning through her heartbreak. "My husband is alone in his office with another woman who's wearing my crown, and I'm overwrought." Victoria moved closer to Alexander, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "Perhaps it would be better if Isabella understood the situation clearly," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Alexander, don't you think it's time to tell her?" Isabella's blood turned to ice. "Tell me what?" Alexander looked uncomfortable for the first time since she'd entered the room. He loosened his tie, a gesture Isabella recognized from their early dating days, when he was nervous about something. "Isabella, our marriage. It served its purpose. The Montenegro financial connections helped establish Blackwood Empire in European markets. But I've outgrown the need for those connections." Each word hit Isabella like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of his desk, her knuckles white with the effort of staying upright. "Served its purpose," she whispered. "Alexander, I'm pregnant with your child. We're about to become a family." "That was an accident," Alexander said with brutal honesty. "I never wanted children. You know that." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "What Alexander is trying to say is that he needs a partner who understands his vision for the future. Someone young, ambitious, without the burden of old-world traditions and expectations." Isabella stared at them both, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of their betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. This was the systematic destruction of everything she had believed about her life, her marriage, her future. How long? She asked quietly. What? Alexander responded. How long have you been seeing her? How long have you been planning to replace me? Victoria and Alexander exchanged a look that told Isabella everything she needed to know. This wasn't a recent development. This was a calculated, long-term strategy. 6 months, Victoria answered with obvious satisfaction. We met at the Global Finance Summit in Monaco. Alexander realized immediately that I was what he needed. 6 months. Isabella's mind reeled. 6 months of lies, of fake smiles, of Alexander coming home late claiming business meetings. 6 months of her planning their future while he planned her disposal. And the crown? Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. A symbol, Victoria said, moving to stand beside Alexander, like they were already a couple posing for engagement photos. Alexander wanted to see how I looked wearing the crown of the woman who would rule beside him. Isabella felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, that was already shattered. Something deeper, something fundamental to who she was. But then, as she watched Victoria's triumphant smile and Alexander's indifferent expression, another feeling began to bloom in her chest. Not heartbreak, not despair. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned like white fire through her veins. Isabella Montenegro didn't just carry the blood of European nobility. She carried the blood of warriors, of queens who had fought off invasions and protected their kingdoms. She carried the blood of women who never surrendered. Slowly, deliberately. Isabella reached for the Montenegro crown. Victoria instinctively stepped back as Isabella's fingers closed around the ancient gold and precious stones. You want to know what this crown represents? Isabella asked, her voice steady and deadly quiet. It represents 15 generations of women who never backed down from a fight. It represents queens who turned small kingdoms into empires. She lifted the crown, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. This crown has never sat on the head of a pretender, and it never will. Isabella placed the crown on her own head, where it belonged. Immediately, her posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and her eyes blazed with the fire of her ancestors. Victoria, she said, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal blood. You seem to be under the impression that being a queen is about beauty and charm. Let me educate you. Being a queen is about power, real power, the kind that destroys enemies completely and permanently. Victoria's confident smile faltered slightly. Isabella, you're being theatrical. Am I? Isabella interrupted. Tell me, Victoria, what do you know about Blackwood Financial Empire? Do you know how it was actually built? Alexander frowned. Isabella, what are you talking about? Isabella smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Oh, my dear husband, did you really think I was just some decorative wife who happened to have useful European connections? Did you really believe that 40% of your empire's initial capital came from some vague investment partnerships? The color began to drain from Alexander's face. What are you saying? I'm saying that Montenegro Holdings isn't just a partner in Blackwood Empire. We own 40% of it. I own 40% of it. And according to the prenuptial agreement you signed, the one my lawyers insisted on infidelity, voids your controlling interest? Victoria looked confused. What does that mean? Isabella's smile grew wider and more dangerous. It means, my dear Victoria, that you've been auditioning for a throne that doesn't belong to the man you're seducing. Alexander's face had gone completely white. Isabella, you can't be serious. Dead serious, Isabella replied. You want to replace me. You want Victoria to wear my crown. Fine. But you'll be doing it as employees of Montenegro Holdings, not as the owners of Blackwood Empire. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Alexander, Victoria, enjoy your little celebration tonight, because tomorrow Your world is going to change completely. As Isabella walked away, the Montenegro crown glittering on her head like a declaration of war, she could hear Victoria's panicked voice behind her. Alexander, what is she talking about? What does she mean? But Isabella didn't wait to hear his answer. She had work to do. The queen was going to take back her throne. The next morning dawned gray and cold over Los Angeles, matching Isabella's mood as she sat in her private study in the Blackwood estate. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep after the devastating discovery in Alexander's office. Instead, she had spent the night on her laptop, making phone calls and reviewing legal documents. The Montenegro crown sat on her desk like a talisman, catching the early morning light and casting rainbow reflections across the mahogany surface. Isabella touched her belly gently, feeling Adrian's reassuring movements. Your daddy made a very big mistake. Little one, she whispered. But don't worry. Mommy's going to make sure you inherit what's rightfully yours. Her first call had been to Marcus Giovanni, a private investigator whose discretion was legendary among the wealthy elite. Marcus had worked for her father years ago, when the Montenegro family had been dealing with corporate espionage in their European holdings. Mrs. Blackwood? Marcus's gravelly voice came through her phone at precisely 8 a.m. I've got some information for you. Isabella had hired Marcus to conduct a complete background investigation on Victoria Sterling, and what he'd discovered was beyond what she had imagined. First, the bad news, Marcus continued. Victoria Sterling isn't her real name. Her real name is Vivian Santos. She's originally from Miami, and she's got quite the rap sheet. Isabella's blood chilled. What kind of rap sheet? 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of extortion. She's made a career out of seducing wealthy men, gaining their trust, then systematically draining their accounts. She's been doing this for at least 7 years. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling nauseous. And Alexander has no idea, none whatsoever. She's good at what she does, creates an entire fake identity, fake education credentials, fake family background, fake everything. According to my sources, she didn't even graduate high school, let alone Columbia Business School like she claimed. What else? Isabella asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She's pregnant, Marcus said. But here's the interesting part. According to medical records I was able to access, she was already pregnant before she met your husband. The timeline doesn't match up. Isabella felt the room spin around her. Are you saying the baby isn't Alexander's? That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a man named Carlos Mendoza in Miami who she's been in contact with regularly. He's the father of her child, and according to phone records, they're planning to disappear once she's extracted enough money from your husband. Isabella set down her phone with shaking hands. Victoria wasn't just a mistress, she was a professional con artist who had targeted Alexander specifically. And Alexander, blinded by lust and midlife crisis, had fallen for it completely. There's more, Marcus continued. Over the past 6 months, Victoria has convinced your husband to transfer approximately $3 million to various offshore accounts. She told him it was for strategic investments in emerging markets. $3 million, Isabella repeated numbly. All of which has been funneled to accounts in the Cayman Islands that she controls. Mrs. Blackwood, your husband is being systematically robbed, and he doesn't even know it. Isabella felt her anger crystallizing into something cold and calculated. Victoria hadn't just stolen her husband, she was stealing his money, planning to destroy him financially, and then disappear with another man's baby. Marcus, I need you to document everything. Bank records, medical records, phone records, evidence of the fraud, everything that will hold up in court. Already on it, Mrs. Blackwood, but there's something else you should know. What? I did some digging into your husband's business practices, and there are some irregularities there too. Nothing illegal, but some deals that might not look good under scrutiny. I think Victoria might be planning to use that information against him. Isabella's mind raced. Victoria wasn't just planning to rob Alexander. She was planning to destroy him completely. probably to prevent him from coming after her when he discovered the truth. After ending the call with Marcus, Isabella made her second important phone call of the day to Diana Blackwood, Alexander's mother, who was currently residing in her villa in Monte Carlo. Isabella, darling, Diana's cultured voice came through the international connection. How lovely to hear from you. How is my grandson? Diana had always treated Isabella like the daughter she'd never had, a formidable woman in her own right. Diana had built her own fortune in real estate before marrying Alexander's father. She was one of the few people who knew the true financial structure of the Blackwood Empire. Diana, I need to tell you something about Alexander, Isabella began, and then poured out the entire story of the affair. Victoria's true identity, the theft, everything. Diana's silence stretched for a long moment after Isabella finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was arctic. That little fool, Diana said, and Isabella knew she was referring to Alexander, not Victoria. He's forgotten who he really is and where his money actually came from. What do you mean? Isabella asked. Isabella, dear, when your families arranged your marriage, it wasn't just about love, though I know you and Alexander genuinely cared for each other. It was about power. The Montenegro holdings that were transferred into the Blackwood Empire weren't just investments. They were the foundation of everything Alexander has built. Isabella had known this, but hearing Diana confirm it made it more real. Without Montenegro capital, Alexander would still be working at some mid-level investment firm, Diana continued. The ungrateful boy seems to have forgotten that he owes his entire empire to your family's generosity. Diana, I want to call a board meeting, Isabella said. I want to exercise my rights as a Montenegro Holdings representative. Diana's laugh was sharp and pleased. Oh, my dear girl, I think it's time my son learned a very important lesson about respecting the women in his life. Consider it done. Isabella's third call was to her own family's attorney, James Morrison, who had handled Montenegro family business for over 30 years. Isabella, James's warm voice was a comfort. I was wondering when you'd call. I've been keeping an eye on the Blackwood financial reports, and I've noticed some concerning irregularities. James, I need to know exactly what my rights are regarding the Blackwood Empire, Isabella said. And I need to know what happens if Alexander is found to be in breach of our marriage contract. Well, James said slowly, that's a complicated question with a very simple answer. According to the prenuptial agreement in the partnership documents, if Alexander engages in adultery or any behavior that damages the Montenegro family reputation, all Montenegro holdings become subject to recall, meaning you could potentially take control of the entire empire. The Montenegro family would become the majority shareholders, and you, as the Montenegro representative, would become the controlling partner. Isabella felt something like hope beginning to bloom in her chest. And legally, this would be binding. Absolutely. Your grandfather was a very smart man when he structured these agreements. He made sure that Montenegro interests would always be protected. James, I want you to prepare all the necessary paperwork. I'm going to call a board meeting for tomorrow. Consider it done. And Isabella, your grandfather would be very proud of you. As Isabella ended her calls, she felt the baby kick strongly, as if Adrian was responding to her newfound determination. She looked at the Montenegro crown on her desk, thinking about all the strong women who had worn it before her. You know what, little one, she said to her unborn son. Mommy isn't going to wait to be rescued. Mommy's going to do the rescuing herself. Isabella spent the rest of the morning crafting her strategy. She would need to move carefully, legally, and decisively. Victoria and Alexander thought they had outmaneuvered her, but they had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Isabella Montenegro wasn't just a pregnant wife who had been betrayed. She was the heir to a financial dynasty that had survived wars, revolutions, and economic collapses. She was a woman who had been raised from birth to protect her family's legacy, and she was about to remind everyone exactly what that meant. That afternoon, Isabella drove to a small cafe in Beverly Hills where she had arranged to meet Victoria. She had sent a simple text, We need to talk. Canyon Coffee, 3 p.m. Come alone. Isabella arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could see the entire cafe. She ordered herbal tea and waited. The Montenegro crown safely locked in her car, but its presence still felt like armor around her. Victoria arrived exactly on time, looking nervous despite her attempts to appear confident. She wore a white designer dress that emphasized her figure, and expensive jewelry that Isabella now realized had been purchased with Alexander's stolen money. Isabella, Victoria said, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm surprised you wanted to meet. Are you? Isabella asked mildly. I would think you'd expect me to want to discuss your relationship with my husband. Victoria's smile was practiced and fake. There's really nothing to discuss. Alexander has made his choice. Has he? Isabella sipped her tea calmly. Tell me, Vivian, does he know about Carlos? Victoria went completely still. The color drained from her face so quickly that Isabella thought she might faint. I'm sorry, what did you call me? Vivian Santos, Isabella said clearly. Born in Miami 25 years ago, high school dropout, 3 arrests for fraud, currently wanted in Florida for writing bad checks. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. I don't know what you're talking about. Isabella opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. She placed it on the table between them and opened it to reveal police booking photos, arrest records, and financial documents. These are copies, Isabella said conversationally. The originals are with my attorney, along with evidence that you've stolen over $3 million from my husband. Victoria stared at the documents like they were poisonous snakes. How did you... I'm not some naive housewife. Vivian, Isabella interrupted. I'm a Montenegro. We've been protecting our family interests for 3 centuries. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman trying to steal my life? Victoria's composure cracked completely. What do you want? I want you to disappear, Isabella said simply. Pack your things, leave Los Angeles, and never contact Alexander again. Do this, and I won't press charges. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. And if I don't, Isabella smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had launched warships, then I'll destroy you so completely that Carlos won't even remember your name. You can't prove anything, Victoria said desperately. Isabella turned a page in the folder, revealing bank transfer records. $3 million transferred to Cayman Islands accounts in your name. Medical records showing you were pregnant before you met Alexander. Phone records of daily calls to Carlos Mendoza. Victoria's breathing became rapid and shallow. Alexander loves me. He'll never believe you. Will he? Isabella asked. Let's see. On one hand, he has his wife of 3 years, mother of his child, member of a family that has supported his business empire. On the other hand, he has a con artist who's been stealing his money and lying about everything, including whose baby she's carrying. Victoria was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread before her. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a desperation that was almost pitiable. You don't understand, she said quietly. I need this money. Carlos and we owe some very dangerous people. That's not my problem, Isabella replied without sympathy. You had a choice of how to solve your money problems, and you chose to destroy my family. Now you have to live with the consequences. Victoria suddenly leaned forward, her voice becoming vicious. You think you've won. You think Alexander will just come crawling back to you. He told me he never loved you. He told me you were just a business arrangement. Isabella felt the words hit her like physical blows, but she kept her expression neutral. Perhaps, but business arrangements are built on legal contracts. Love affairs are built on lies. Which do you think will survive in court? Victoria realized she was beaten. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. How long do I have? 24 hours, Isabella said, closing the folder. Disappear completely, or I'll have you arrested for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. As Isabella stood to leave, Victoria grabbed her wrist. Why are you being so generous? Why not just destroy me now? Isabella looked down at the desperate woman who had tried to steal her life. Because I'm not you, Vivian. I don't destroy people for pleasure. I destroy them when they threaten my family. Isabella pulled her wrist free and walked away, leaving Victoria sitting alone with the evidence of her crimes spread across the table. As she drove home, Isabella felt the baby kick again, and she smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "Don't worry, Adrian," she said softly. "Mommy is just getting started." Tomorrow was the board meeting. Tomorrow, she would take back everything that belonged to her family. Tomorrow, she would claim her throne. The boardroom on the 60th floor of Blackwood Tower had witnessed many corporate battles, but none quite like what was about to unfold. Isabella arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a navy blue Armani power suit that emphasized her authority rather than her pregnancy. The Montenegro crown sat regally atop her head, not as jewelry, but as a symbol of the ancient power she represented. She had spent the previous evening in preparation, reviewing every document, every contract, every legal precedent that would support her claim. James Morrison, her family's attorney, had flown in from New York and sat beside her now, his briefcase containing enough legal ammunition to level a corporate empire. The conference table was set for 12, the full board of directors of Blackwood Financial Empire. Isabella had specifically requested that Victoria be present as well, ostensibly as Alexander's strategic advisor, but really so that everyone could witness her humiliation. Diana Blackwood entered first, elegant and formidable in a charcoal gray suit. She kissed Isabella's cheek and whispered, "It's time my son learned what happens when you cross a Montenegro woman." The other board members filed in titans of finance and industry who had built their fortunes alongside Alexander. They were all men over 50, with the arrogance that came from never having been truly challenged. Isabella watched them taking their seats, noting their dismissive glances at her crown, their condescending smiles at her presence. They had no idea what was coming. Alexander entered with Victoria at his side, and Isabella felt a stab of pain at how beautiful they looked together. Alexander wore his confidence like armor, clearly believing he controlled this meeting. Victoria had chosen a red dress that was stunning but entirely inappropriate for a board meeting, the kind of outfit a mistress would wear, not a strategic advisor. "Isabella," Alexander said as he took his seat at the head of the table, "I have to say, I'm surprised you called this meeting, and the crown is an interesting choice." "I thought it was appropriate," Isabella replied calmly, "given that we're here to discuss Montenegro family interests in this company." Alexander frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." James Morrison opened his briefcase and began distributing documents around the table. "Gentlemen, what you're receiving are copies of the original partnership agreements between Montenegro Holdings and Blackwood Financial Empire, signed at the time of Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood's marriage." Isabella watched as the board members scanned the documents, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. She had deliberately kept the true extent of Montenegro's involvement in the company quiet over the years, allowing Alexander to maintain the illusion that he was solely responsible for his success. "As you can see," James continued, "Montenegro Holdings provided 40% of the initial capital for Blackwood Financial Empire. This investment was structured as a partnership agreement with very specific terms." Board member Richard Hayes, a longtime friend of Alexander's, looked up from his documents. "I don't understand. Are you saying Montenegro owns 40% of this company?" "Not exactly," Isabella said, standing slowly. Even heavily pregnant, she commanded the room's attention. "According to these agreements, Montenegro Holdings owns 40% of Blackwood Financial Empire as long as the marriage between Alexander Blackwood and Isabella Montenegro remains intact and both parties honor their commitments." Alexander's face had gone pale. "Isabella, what are you doing?" "I'm protecting my family's interests," Isabella replied. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Victoria, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "I don't understand what any of this has to do with me." Isabella smiled, and every person in the room felt the temperature drop. "Oh, Vivian, it has everything to do with you." Victoria's eyes widened in terror at the use of her real name. Alexander looked confused. Vivian Isabella? What are you talking about? Isabella nodded to James, who opened another folder. Alexander, I'd like you to meet the real Victoria Sterling, whose actual name is Vivian Santos. The projector screen behind Isabella lit up with police booking photos, arrest records, and financial documents. The board members leaned forward, studying the images with growing alarm. Vivian Santos, Isabella continued, her voice carrying the authority of a prosecuting attorney. Age 25, high school dropout from Miami, 3 arrests for fraud, 2 for identity theft, 1 for extortion. She has made a career out of seducing wealthy men and systematically robbing them. Alexander stared at the screen in shock. That's impossible. Victoria graduated from Columbia. She worked for Goldman Sachs. No, Isabella said firmly. Vivian Santos created a fake identity specifically to target you. Her education credentials are forged. Her work history is fabricated. Even her pregnancy is a lie. What do you mean? Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. James distributed another set of documents. Medical records obtained through legal channels show that Ms. Santos was already pregnant when she first approached Mr. Blackwood. The timeline makes it impossible for him to be the father. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Victoria Vivian had gone completely white and was gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Furthermore, Isabella continued, over the past 6 months, Vivian has convinced Alexander to transfer over $3 million to offshore accounts that she controls. Money that was supposedly for strategic investments, but has actually been stolen. Alexander turned to Victoria with an expression of complete betrayal. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me Isabella is lying. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. The bank records don't lie, Isabella said. The medical records don't lie. The police records don't lie. The only person who has been lying is sitting right there in the red dress. Board member Thomas Chen spoke up. If this is true, then Mr. Blackwood has not only violated his marriage contract, but has also exposed the company to significant financial liability. Exactly, Isabella said. Which brings us to the real purpose of this meeting. She walked around the table, the Montenegro crown catching the light with each step. Every eye in the room followed her. According to the partnership agreements, if Alexander violates the terms of our marriage through adultery or behavior that damages the Montenegro family reputation, all Montenegro holdings become subject to immediate recall. Alexander finally found his voice. What does that mean exactly? James Morrison answered. It means, Mr. Blackwood, that your wife now controls 65% of this company, the 40% from Montenegro Holdings, plus the 25% that transfers to her as penalty for your breach of contract. The silence in the room was deafening. Isabella could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Adrian kicking as if he sensed the magnitude of the moment. You're telling me, Alexander said slowly, that Isabella now owns controlling interest in my company. Your company. Isabella's voice cracked like a whip. Alexander, this was never your company. It was built with my family's money, supported by my family's connections, and secured by my family's reputation. You were the CEO, but you were never the owner. She placed her hands on the conference table and leaned forward. You wanted to replace me with a con artist. You wanted her to wear my crown and sit on my throne, but you forgot one very important thing. What's that? Alexander asked, his voice defeated. You can't give away what was never yours to begin with. Victoria suddenly stood up, her chair clattering backward. This is insane, Alexander. You can't let her do this. Isabella turned to face her. Vivian, you have exactly 1 minute to leave this building voluntarily before I have security escort you out. You can't do this to me, Victoria screamed. Alexander loves me. We have plans. Had, Isabella corrected. You had plans. Plans to steal his money and disappear with your real boyfriend, Carlos. Plans that are now over. Victoria looked around the room desperately. but every face was turned against her. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "Security," Isabella said into the conference room phone. "Please escort Ms. Santos from the building. She is no longer welcome here." As security guards entered the room, Victoria made one last desperate play. She lunged toward Isabella, clearly intending to attack the pregnant woman. But Diana Blackwood, despite being in her 60s, moved with lightning speed. She caught Victoria's wrist and twisted it with the efficiency of someone who had learned self-defense in finishing school. "Touch my daughter-in-law, and I'll make sure you spend the next decade in prison," Diana said quietly. Victoria was led away screaming threats and curses, her voice echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors finally closed. Isabella turned back to the board members, all of whom were staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, "I believe we have some business to discuss." Alexander stood up slowly. "Isabella, please, can we talk about this privately?" Isabella looked at her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with something that might have been pity. "Alexander, you made your choice when you decided Victoria was what you needed. Now you get to live with the consequences. But the company, this is my life's work." "No," Isabella corrected. "This is my family's life's work. You were just the face we put on it." She turned to the board members. "Gentlemen, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Alexander Blackwood as CEO. All in favor." Every hand in the room went up, including Diana's. "Motion carried," Isabella said. "I hereby assume the position of CEO of Blackwood Financial Empire, effective immediately." Alexander slumped in his chair, the full magnitude of his losses finally hitting him. "Isabella, what about our marriage? What about our son?" Isabella's hand went to her belly. "Our son will inherit what is rightfully his, a company built on honor and integrity, not lies and betrayal. As for our marriage," she removed her wedding ring and placed it on the conference table. "Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Alexander, you can remain with the company as Regional Director of West Coast Operations. Your salary will be $200,000 annually. That's more than generous, considering." Considering what?" he asked bitterly. Isabella looked back at him, the Montenegro crown glittering on her head like a declaration of victory. "Considering you tried to give away a throne that was never yours to a woman who never deserved it." As Isabella left the boardroom, she could hear the murmurs of the board members behind her, already discussing the transition of power. She had done it. She had taken back everything that belonged to her family, but more importantly, she had ensured that her son would inherit his birthright. The Queen had reclaimed her throne. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that shook the financial world, Isabella Montenegro Blackwood stood on the balcony of her new penthouse office, holding her 3-month-old son Adrian in her arms. The baby had his father's dark hair, but his mother's striking green eyes, and already showed signs of the intelligence that ran in both bloodlines. The office had been completely redesigned since Isabella took control of Blackwood Financial Empire. Gone were Alexander's dark leather and masculine angles, replaced with elegant marble, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles. The Montenegro crown sat in a bulletproof display case, no longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of corporate power that commanded respect throughout the financial world. "Look at your kingdom, little prince," Isabella whispered to Adrian, who gurgled contentedly in her arms. "One day, all of this will be yours. But remember what Mommy learned. True power isn't given, it's earned." The transformation of Blackwood Financial Empire under Isabella's leadership had been nothing short of miraculous. In 6 months, she had increased company profits by 300% by pivoting towards sustainable investments and green energy initiatives. Her connections to European nobility had opened doors that Alexander never could have imagined, and her Harvard MBA had proven that she was far more than a decorative wife. Isabella had restructured the company into Montenegro Blackwood Holdings, officially acknowledging the family partnership that had always existed behind the scenes. She had also established the Montenegro Foundation, a charitable organization with an initial endowment of $100 million, focused on supporting women who had survived domestic abuse and betrayal. The business press had dubbed her the Queen of Wall Street West, and Forbes had recently featured her on their cover with the headline, "From Crown to Corporation, the Woman Who Redefined Power." But Isabella's greatest pride came from the knowledge that she had built something worthy of passing down to her son. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her assistant, Maria, entered with a smile. "Mrs. Blackwood, your 2 o'clock appointment is here?" Isabella checked her Cartier watch, a gift from the Queen of Spain, congratulating her on her business success. "Send him in, please." Prince Eduardo Martinez of Monaco entered the office, and Isabella felt her heart skip a beat as it did every time she saw him. Eduardo was everything Alexander had never been: kind, intelligent, genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, and completely supportive of her business ambitions. They had met at a charity gala in Monte Carlo, where Isabella had been the keynote speaker about women's empowerment in finance. Eduardo had approached her afterward, not to flirt or impress her, but to discuss her fascinating insights about microfinance in developing countries. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values. "Isabella," Eduardo said, his Spanish accent adding warmth to her name. "You look radiant." Eduardo was 34, a year younger than Isabella, with the kind of classical good looks that graced royal portraits. But what attracted Isabella most was his intelligence and his genuine commitment to using his royal platform for charitable work. He ran education programs throughout Europe and had earned a PhD in international development from Oxford. "Thank you," Isabella replied, shifting Adrian to one arm so she could greet Eduardo properly. "How was your flight from Monaco?" "Long, but worth it to see you both," Eduardo said, gently stroking Adrian's cheek. The baby immediately grabbed Eduardo's finger and held on tightly, making both adults laugh. Over the months, Eduardo had become a constant presence in their lives, treating Adrian like his own son and supporting Isabella's demanding career without ever trying to overshadow her achievements. Unlike Alexander, who had seen her royal connections as tools for his own advancement, Eduardo appreciated Isabella for who she was as a person. "How's the little prince today?" Eduardo asked, taking Adrian into his experienced arms. As an uncle to 7 nieces and nephews, Eduardo was comfortable with babies in a way that Alexander never had been. "He's been very attentive during our board meeting this morning," Isabella said with a smile. "I think he's going to be a natural businessman." "Just like his mother," Eduardo replied, settling into one of the comfortable chairs near Isabella's desk. "Speaking of which, how did the European expansion meeting go?" Isabella's eyes lit up with excitement. "Better than expected. The consortium has agreed to our terms for the renewable energy project in Spain. We'll be building solar farms that will power half of Andalusia within 5 years." "That's incredible," Eduardo said, and his pride in her accomplishments was genuine and obvious. "You're changing the world." "Isabella, we're changing the world," Isabella corrected. "This project wouldn't be possible without your contacts in the Spanish government." Their partnership was everything her marriage to Alexander should have been: 2 people supporting each other's dreams and building something greater together than either could achieve alone. A soft chime from Isabella's computer indicated a video call. She glanced at the screen inside. "It's the quarterly review with the board. Would you mind staying? I'd like their input on the Monaco development project." "Of course," Eduardo said, settling back with Adrian, who was now fast asleep in his arms. Isabella activated the video conference, and the faces of board members from around the world appeared on her wall-mounted screen. These were no longer the dismissive older men who had underestimated her 6 months ago. Isabella had systematically replaced half the board with brilliant women and progressive men who shared her vision for ethical business practices. "Good afternoon, everyone," Isabella began. "I'm pleased to report that our Q3 profits are up 40% over last quarter, and our sustainability index has reached the highest rating in the industry." Board member Sarah Chen, the former CEO of a tech company, smiled from her office in Singapore. Isabella, the renewable energy division is exceeding all projections. The press is calling Montenegro Blackwood the most forward-thinking financial company in the world. The press is right, added Dr. Rachel Freeman from London, a former investment banker who now focused on ethical investing. Our client base has grown by 60% this quarter alone. Everyone wants to work with a company that puts values before pure profit. Isabella felt a warmth that had nothing to do with professional success. She had built something she could be proud of, something worthy of the Montenegro name. There is one piece of business I'd like to discuss, Isabella said. Prince Eduardo has proposed a partnership opportunity in Monaco, a development project that would create affordable housing while maintaining the principality's environmental standards. Eduardo briefly outlined the project, speaking with the passion and expertise that had first attracted Isabella to him. The board members asked intelligent questions and offered enthusiastic support. After the call ended, Isabella leaned back in her chair, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. "Thank you for that presentation," she told Eduardo. "Your project is going to help so many families." "Thank you for making it possible," Eduardo replied. "Together, we can accomplish things neither of us could do alone." Isabella studied his face, seeing the sincerity and warmth that still sometimes surprised her after Alexander's coldness. "Eduardo, can I ask you something, anything? Why me? You could have any woman in the world. Why choose a divorced single mother with a complicated business empire?" Eduardo was quiet for a moment, gently rocking the sleeping Adrian. "Do you know what I first noticed about you at that gala in Monte Carlo? My speech about microfinance." Eduardo smiled. "Your crown, not the Montenegro crown, though that's beautiful, but the invisible crown. The way you carried yourself, the way you commanded respect without demanding it, the way you cared more about helping others than impressing anyone." He met her eyes directly. "Isabella, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever met. You took betrayal and turned it into strength. You took loss and turned it into gain. You took a crown that was just jewelry and turned it into real power." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "Eduardo, I'm not finished," he said gently. "Adrian is not an inconvenience or a complication. He's a gift, and I would be honored to help you raise him, if you'll let me." Before Isabella could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Alexander Blackwood is here. He says it's urgent." Isabella and Eduardo exchanged glances. Alexander had been working as regional director for 6 months, doing his job competently but with none of his former arrogance. He had attempted to apologize to Isabella several times, but she had made it clear that their relationship was purely professional now. "Send him in," Isabella said. Alexander entered the office looking older than his 35 years. The stress of losing everything had aged him, and he carried himself with the defeated posture of a man who had learned hard lessons too late. "Isabella," he said, then noticed Eduardo holding Adrian. His face tightened with an emotion that might have been jealousy or regret. "I didn't realize you had company." "Prince Eduardo is my business partner," Isabella said coolly. "What did you need?" "Alexander." Alexander seemed to struggle with his words. I wanted to give you this." He placed an envelope on her desk. "It's my resignation." Isabella frowned. "Your resignation, why?" "Because you've built something incredible here, and I don't want to be the thing that holds it back," Alexander said quietly. "Everyone knows our history. Having me here, even in a reduced capacity, creates complications." Isabella opened the envelope and scanned the formal resignation letter. "Where will you go?" "I've been offered a position with a consulting firm in Chicago. It's a chance to start over. Away from all of this." He gestured around the office that had once been his domain. "Alexander," Isabella said, her voice softer than it had been in months. "You don't have to leave. Despite everything, you're still Adrian's father." Alexander looked at his son sleeping peacefully in Eduardo's arms. "I know, and I want to be part of his life, but I can do that without working here." He turned to Eduardo. Your Highness, I know I have no right to ask this, but please take care of them. They deserve better than I ever gave them. Eduardo nodded solemnly. They will always be safe and loved. Alexander looked back at Isabella one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it, you deserve so much better. Yes, Isabella agreed simply. I did. After Alexander left, Isabella sat in contemplative silence. Eduardo placed the sleeping Adrian in his bassinet and moved to stand behind Isabella's chair, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. How do you feel? He asked. Free, Isabella said after a moment. For the first time in years, completely free. Eduardo leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Good, because I have something I want to ask you. Isabella turned in her chair to face him. Eduardo had moved to kneel beside her chair, and he was holding a small velvet box. Eduardo, what are you? Isabella Montenegro Blackwood, Eduardo said formally. You are the most magnificent woman I have ever known. You are brilliant, compassionate, strong, and beautiful. You are an incredible mother and an inspiring leader. He opened the box to reveal the most beautiful ring Isabella had ever seen, not ostentatious like her first engagement ring, but elegant and timeless, with a perfect emerald surrounded by diamonds. Will you marry me? Eduardo asked. Will you let me spend my life supporting your dreams and helping you raise Adrian? Will you be my queen? Not because I need one, but because you deserve a kingdom worthy of your crown. Isabella looked down at the man kneeling beside her chair, offering her not just marriage but true partnership. She thought about her journey from betrayed wife to corporate queen, from victim to victor. Yes, she whispered and then louder. Yes, of course, yes. Eduardo slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. As he stood to kiss her, Adrian woke up and began to coo happily, as if he approved of the engagement. When Eduardo asked against her lips, Soon, Isabella replied, but first we have a company to run and a world to change. Eduardo laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less from the Queen of Montenegro, Blackwood Holdings. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting golden light through the office windows, Isabella stood with her fiancé and her son, looking out over the empire she had built from the ashes of betrayal. The Montenegro crown glittered in its case, no longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of the power that came from knowing one's own worth. 6 months ago, Victoria had tried to steal Isabella's crown, thinking it would make her a queen. But she had learned what Isabella had always known. Crowns don't make queens. Queens make crowns meaningful. And Isabella Montenegro Blackwood was every inch a queen. 1 year later, the wedding of Isabella Montenegro Blackwood and Prince Eduardo Martinez of Monaco was hailed as the social event of the decade. Held at the Monaco Royal Palace, it brought together royalty, celebrities, and business leaders from around the world. Isabella wore her grandmother's wedding dress, updated with modern touches, and of course, the Montenegro crown. Adrian, now walking and babbling in 3 languages, served as ring bearer with the help of his new father Eduardo. Alexander attended the ceremony at Isabella's invitation, bringing his new girlfriend a kind kindergarten teacher from Chicago who loved him for who he was, not what he owned. During her wedding speech, Isabella said, A year ago, I thought my world was ending. I discovered that sometimes, what feels like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. Today, Montenegro Blackwood Holdings is valued at over $10 billion and is widely regarded as the most ethical and successful financial firm in the world. Isabella has been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the most influential women of the year, and her autobiography, From Crown to Throne, A Queen's Journey, has become a bestseller. The Montenegro Foundation has helped over 50,000 women worldwide, providing education, financial support, and legal assistance to those who have faced betrayal and abuse. Isabella personally reads every application and often meets with the women the foundation helps. Victoria Vivian Santos was eventually arrested in Miami for fraud and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Her son is being raised by his father Carlos, who has since turned his life around and works as a mechanic. Isabella has never spoken publicly about Victoria, believing that the best revenge is a life well lived. Adrian Montenegro Martinez Blackwood is now 2 years old and shows signs of inheriting both his mother's business acumen and his stepfather's humanitarian spirit. He speaks 4 languages fluently for a toddler and has already been photographed for several royal family portraits. Isabella still wears the Montenegro crown to important business meetings, not as jewelry, but as a reminder of the strength that flows through her bloodline. It has become her signature, and financial magazines often feature her image with the crown as a symbol of powerful, ethical leadership. When young women write to her asking for advice about dealing with betrayal or building their own empires, Isabella always responds with the same message. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself. A crown is just metal and stones until it sits on the head of someone worthy of wearing it. Make yourself worthy, and the crown will follow. The Montenegro crown has found its rightful place not as a trophy to be stolen, but as a symbol of the power that comes from integrity, strength, and the unshakable knowledge of one's own worth. And in the boardroom of Montenegro Blackwood Holdings, where decisions that affect millions of people are made daily, it serves as a constant reminder that true queens are not born. They are forged in the fires of adversity and crowned by their own courage. Isabella Montenegro. Blackwood had lost a faithless husband but gained an empire. She had been betrayed by a criminal but found true love with a prince. She had started as a victim but transformed into a victor. Most importantly, she had learned that the most powerful crown of all is the one you place on your own head, the crown of self-respect, determination, and the unwavering belief that you deserve nothing less than the very best that life has to offer. The queen had not just reclaimed her throne, she had built a kingdom worthy of her crown, and that kingdom would endure for generations to come.